right, so our objectives for tonight are to go through and show you how the whole rate study process has wrapped up. We'll review and accept the meeting notes from our last meeting, number 48. Ernie's going to go through some BWS updates, and then we'll go through future meeting dates. I'm going to kind of give you a heads up. We have, for 48 meetings, we've had jam-packed meeting agendas where we can barely fit in everything in. We decided to start off the year with a little bit more of a more relaxed agenda. I'm guessing we're not going to spend the whole 2 hours together, but important stuff to go through, and then we'll kind of take a look ahead on what's going to be going on over the next year. So now's the opportunity for public comment on any items on the agenda. Don't see anyone from the public, and I don't see any raised hands, so we'll move on. Accepting the notes from meeting 48. These got sent out ahead of time, and as always, I know you did an amazingly thorough review, and if there's any questions, comments, corrections, now's the time to bring it up. Hearing none and seeing none, we'll consider those notes accepted.
Oh yeah, Dave, just really quickly, I just want to shout out again to Keone, who works really, really hard on those notes, and it's not easy. So thank you, Keone, for your hard work. Absolutely.
Thank you, Keone. Okay, water rates update. So we last talked about water rates in October. Yeah, so lots happened since then. Let's go through it. Wanted to cover what was proposed. What did the board hear from what was proposed? How has it been addressed? And then what actions have been taken since then? So as a refresher on where the money goes, this is a breakdown of this current year's operating fund expenditures. So if you look at the pie and you start up at the top, those dark blue and purple slices, they add up to about 27% in total. So the blue slice is the cash funded portion of the capital improvement program, and the purple slice is the debt service. So the money that goes off to pay down the bonds and money that's been borrowed in the past. So together, that's about 27% of the operating fund expenditures. Employee salaries and health and retirement benefits together equal about 29%. You can see those in the orange and light blue slices. Operations and maintenance is 31% of the budget. That's shown in the gray. And then electricity, and as you know from past conversations, that's gone up a lot and was significantly over budget last year, but that's $32.6 million, or about 12%. So total expenditures budgeted this year of $276 million. What's been done with the last round of rate increases from the period of 2018 to 2023? Well, a lot of investments in the water system and capital improvement projects, both for repair, replacement, and system expansion. In total, almost 500 projects totaling $770 million of investment in the system. So just a tremendous amount accomplished, and a lot to be proud of there in putting that money to work. As we always talk about, the strategy for rate increases is about striking an appropriate balance between safe and dependable water service and rate affordability. And there's a number of factors that the board has looked at very closely in particular with this round of rate increases. And that's the continuation of deferring less critical capital projects, focusing on water quality and source protection, keeping O&M costs as flat as possible, initiating a update of the water master plan in this fiscal year, and then adjusting the day's working capital to proactively address the issue of affordability while still retaining enough working capital to be able to effectively respond to risks. So what's being planned with these rate increases? This shows the capital improvement program for fiscal years 24 through 29. The different colored bands are different types of projects. And if we start with that big yellow band in the middle, those are sources. You can see a total investment of almost $400 million. Some of this driven by the Red Hill response. That's money for monitoring wells and exploratory wells. You can see the Kaliloa seawater desalination project there is a big piece of that. And then in the later years, replacement sources again as part of the Red Hill response. That light blue band just above it, that's $118 million for securities, control systems, facility improvements. And then the thin green band above that, that's storage. The biggest investment being for 8.5 million gallons of storage in fiscal years 28, 29. Above that, you see the dark blue band. That's for pump renewal and replacement. Keep in mind, those pumps are like the heart of the system, moving water from sources to where it's needed. And then the brown band above that, that's pipeline, new and replacement pipelines. It's the biggest part of the capital improvement program at $425 million. And that's expected to replace over 41 miles of pipe. Any questions on that? Okay, so the rates that were proposed were for a 5.5-year period beginning on February 1st, 2024, and going through with the final increase being on July 1st, 2028. The rates would remain in effect unless superseded, and those increases would be 10% on February 1st, 10% on July 1st, and then 9% a year following, 8.5%, 8%, and 8% each subsequent July 1st. Really planning for rate increases each and every year. The increases are the same for all customer classes, whether it's single-family residential, multi-unit residential, agricultural, non-residential, or non-potable and recycled, but we varied with your input, varied the increases with the tiers. So the idea being for those residential water users whose water rates are tiered, the highest water users would have a higher increase in that top tier usage, while the increases would remain lower in the lower water use tiers. Now, I know you've seen what those proposed rates look like. I've shown them for a couple of different meetings. We're not going to go back through them. Suffice it to say that they haven't changed from what was formally presented to the Small Business Regulatory Review Board at a hearing back in August of this year. So no changes to them as it's gone through this process. It's consistent with what you've seen, and all that information is in your meeting notes. It's in presentations on the board's website. Plenty of places to go get that. Important to note that important elements are continuation of the fee waivers of the water system facilities charge and new meter charge for affordable and homeless housing units, and also waiver of the meter charge for fire sprinkler retrofits. Those elements have been retained. And also, as you might have heard during our chatter at the beginning of prior to the start of the meeting, there's a new waiver of the water system facilities charge and water meter charge for new small farmers coming onto the system for the first time. This is exciting. This is for 3/4 and 1-inch meters. The total amount is limited to $1 million, which is equivalent to what the state granted for a new exploratory well back in 2021. The board will require proof of the applicant being a viable commercial ag operation and a water use plan to ensure efficient water use for the life of that farm. But really exciting opportunity here, meant to encourage local food production and provide a boost to small farmers just starting out. There was an extensive outreach process conducted. I know we've talked about some elements of it. Input was gathered from the public all the way through up till the public hearing date, which was on November 27th. Rate proposal information was available on the BWS's website. There were actually a total of almost 3,500 views of that information on the website. Over 1,700 of those being unique. 35 social media users clicked on that link, the QR code. There was an overview video of the rate proposal, which had 284 views on BWS's website. 4 different community meetings were held, all in August. Lighter attendance than would have been hoped, but not much different from the attendance from 4 years previous. So these are the locations of those. The videos of those community meetings were also available on BWS's website, where they had 75 views. All 4 meetings aired on Alelo at least 4 times each through late September, and all 4 meetings were available on Alelo Video on Demand. 21 neighborhood board presentations with about 420 attendees were held. The BWS staff were really busy, and a huge thank you to the entire BWS team for covering those meetings. I think Ernie was really adamant that each of the division managers got out and played a key role in that outreach and spread the load around. So a lot of coverage, a lot of hard work there. There were an additional 7 interest group presentations with about 150 attendees. And of course, a number of reviews of the rate proposal came before this group, along with the commercial stakeholder advisory group. And you can see some other groups that had presentations listed here also. Information on the rate proposal was distributed at a number of community events, which are listed here. And a special edition of Water Matters was mailed out to all 170,000 BWS account holders. So the types of comments that were received, 117 written and oral comments were received, not including those from the neighborhood board and community meetings. 102 opposed or expressed concern about those rates. 15 supported them and indicated that they felt they were needed. Staff received and responded to about 130 questions at the different neighborhood board meetings. And after presentation and discussion, the feedback was that in general, these groups understood the necessity of the increase. The topics that came up during these questions focused on Red Hill. That was the biggest area of question. Statements of the increases being too high, concerns over cost of living, impacts to Kapuna or those on fixed income, concerns about the sewer rates, questions about development, planning, non-residential rates, fee waivers, things like that. Some specific examples of comments here. On Red Hill, there were statements of having any rate increase related to Red Hill, and I think a strong sentiment that the Navy should be paying for the costs of Red Hill as opposed to BWS customers. That's certainly a statement that BWS agrees with, but there's no money coming from the Navy yet. So in the meantime, these increases need to move forward, and the board has to make these investments in the system and keep things running while they see cost reimbursement. So yeah, Kathleen.
Yeah, Ernie, did you want to expand upon that a little bit like you did earlier today, just what the real cost is right now?
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen and Dave. So that the way that the media portrayed things, it seems like, and I think people got a little confused and they thought that the rate increases were needed because of Red Hill. But the reality is, when we look at our CIP program, $1.26 billion over the next 6 years, only about 6% of that is attributed to Red Hill related projects at this time within that 6-year window. So that's about $77 million out of 1.26 million. The majority of the need for the rate increases are simply the cost of operation of our water system is increasing. Inflation continues to increase the cost of operations. And unfortunately, the price of doing business hasn't actually gone down. So it continues, we continue to have that, electricity being one good example. And with the unrest in the Middle East, there's a potential that power costs may still stay relatively high. So the majority of the cost needed because of the rate increases, majority of the need of the rate increases is really related to just the cost of doing business and is still high. And we continue to need to invest in our infrastructure, and the cost of that construction is not coming down. We're still encountering challenges with supply chain disruptions, inflating the costs and extending out the timeline to get material for our projects.
Bernie,
yeah.
Question, in looking for alternative water sources, are you guys at least in conversation with the Red Hill people in the Navy about them possibly picking up some of that cost also, because that's a direct result of Red Hill. Not completely, but
Yeah, I mean, not all of those. Remember our water master plan that was adopted, and with the great input from the stakeholder advisory group back in 2015, 2016 timeframe, the board adopted a 30-year water master plan, and we looked at the future and where growth would occur. And we saw in the water master plan that is clearly we would need more source capacity in the EVA area, which is growing rapidly. Also in the Honolulu urban core and portions of central Oahu, that we actually had to develop more sources to meet that demand. Red Hill's impact is the shutdown of the 3 wells, and we continue to deal with that, but Red Hill is not the main driver of the need for development of new sources. It just made things worse, and we had to really relook at our CIP and start to put source development as a high priority and a bigger portion of that $1.26 million. On the Navy, and Dean, thank you. And I saw Elizabeth had her hand up too. I'll get to you, Elizabeth, shortly.
Okay.
One of the things that occurred too, remember the water system at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam was contaminated with jet fuel. So the Navy contaminated their own people living on Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, working and living there, about 90,000 plus people. So that was the event. So from that time, from November 2021, we had 2 years to file a claim against the U.S. Navy. And the claim is under something called the Federal Tort Claims Act. So back in late October, we filed that claim with the Navy because we had a 2-year statute of limitations. So from November 2021 to November of 2023, we had to get that claim in there to give us the opportunity to pursue cost recovery from the U.S. Navy. And we filed that claim. The Navy has 6 months from that time we filed, and I think they acknowledged it, early November of 2023. So they have 6 months from that time frame to respond to our claim or not. And that claim was for $1.21 billion. And that's only our ask. We haven't actually received any money from the military at this point. Elizabeth, go ahead.
Yeah. Speaking to not receiving any money from the military, Congressman Case was out my way for a town hall meeting, and he actually said that money's already being given to the military to help with Red Hill. And so I was wondering if there's a disconnect there from his office with Board of Water Supply.
Yeah,
and why funds will be going that way as opposed to bringing it in a little differently to assist Board of Water Supply.
Yeah, so actually the appropriations, I believe, was, and I appreciate our congressional delegation, our Hawaii delegation, because I think between all 4 of them and Kai Kahele when he was in office too, were able to obtain, around almost $2 billion for the Department of Defense. But it was money allocated to the Department of Defense, and there was no authority with that money under the Defense Authorization Act, National Defense Authorization Act, Reauthorization Act, to actually give that money to the Board of Water Supply. Although we are talking to Mark Fox, who is part of this group, who's also doing some work under the REPI program to see if we can tap some money that could help with enhancing and protecting our watersheds in certain areas.
So my
So
my
that 2
last would
billion,
be,
the
yeah.
2 billion went to the DOD, and it didn't, none of that got to the Board of Water Supply.
So, you know, Congressman Case is very approachable. And I'm just wondering, and he's part of the Appropriations Committee, you know, is it still worthy of trying to get a meeting with him and bringing this to his attention? You can think about it. You don't have to answer right now.
No,
But
thank you. We
yeah.
actually have been in dialogue with Congressman Case and also Senator Schatz's office to do something, and we did put in projects for the proposed federal FY25 budget, what they call congressional set-asides. And I think Raylin, who's from our executive support office, was very helpful in getting those, working with the congressional delegation to get those basically CIP projects requested, not necessary for Red Hill, but for other BWS projects, so that would free up the need for us to fund it from our ratepayer funds. Ray, you want to, what was the total amount that we put in the requests?
There
Sorry.
was, it was around 15. We had 3 projects that we, with both Congressman Case and Senator Schatz, we put in requests for congressionally directed spending. I think there were 3 projects. They were each about $5 million. None made it in to the Senate appropriations bill. One made it into on the House side appropriations bill, but for about $900,000, and they haven't moved those appropriations bills at all. So I don't know that. Yeah, we tried though. We worked with the staff. They were very helpful, but yes, they did not push forward our $5 million project requests. I guess they were unable to put in everything.
Yeah, we will continue to work with our congressional delegation to look for opportunities to tap federal funds, especially the grant type funds. So, but thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, good questions about Red Hill, and thanks, Ernie, for the for the comments on putting it in perspective with the overall increase. Very helpful. Other comments that were heard had to do with the impact to Kapuna or those on others on fixed income, and then just overall comments about cost of living and rates already being too high and it being difficult to live in Hawaii because of the costs. There continues to be confusion about sewer rates and whether or not they're, whether or not those are a different agency. We've talked about that many times, and a sentiment that the sewer charges are too high. And Mark, I see your hand. I'll get to you in just a second.
Yep,
and
finish
then,
up.
Some questions about the structure in rates that, ideas about that non-residential rate should have a different structure to them, reflecting the sentiment that tourism industry, tourists should pay more and share a bigger burden of the cost, those types of issues. Mark, go ahead.
Sure. And since Ernie brought up the Defense Department program that I'm working for right now, the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program, or lovingly known as REPI, Ernie, Barry, whoever you'd like, let me know when you'd like me to come by and kind of fill you in on how the program works, what it can fund, that kind of thing. It can't be used directly to address the Navy's responsibilities and cleanup and the like, but it can be used to do, as you just described, Ernie, assisting with priority watershed management and protection, the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry and Wildlife, by way of example, has done a fantastic job of taking advantage of REPI funding opportunities for a good amount of their watershed work, including up in Waiaba above Pearl Harbor. I was there on a field trip visit on Tuesday with a Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, and when we rolled up to the Waimano Base Yard, they just happened to be unloading a giant flatbed tractor trailer of fence material that is purchased but with REPI funds to help do a fence project up there. So anyway, love to fill you in on what can be done, how the program works. It all has to be spent with partners off site, off the installations. But happy to come by anytime. And I've already socialized kind of up the chain with the military services here that I'd like to do that. And I, just would need to let them know that I was coming to see you.
Yeah.
But I was told that I wouldn't have to ask permission.
Good job, Mark.
Yeah,
we'll meet.
Sure, let me know, and happy to come by and fill you folks in, and we'll conspire on something good.
Thank you, Mark.
You're very, very welcome. Happy to do it.
Yeah, perfect. Any comments or questions before I move on? There was also some support for the rate increases. I think I made the comment that at a lot of the neighborhood board meetings, although people weren't thrilled about it, after hearing about the reasons, the need for the increases, the thoughtful approach that BWS had taken to crafting them, and making strides to maintain affordability, that was reflected in some folks voicing out and out support. So that was great to hear. All city council members received briefings. There were 7 of them. There was a briefing to the managing director back in July. So good visibility there. Outreach through the media. You can see some of that summarized here. Hopefully some of you saw this and realized what was going on as you were hearing it or listening to it. And then I mentioned back in August, BWS, as required, went to the Small Business Regulatory Review Board. This is a requirement for any proposed rule changes, which includes rates or new regulations that impact or have the potential to impact small businesses. At that meeting back in August, they made a unanimous recommendation to proceed to the public hearing process. And that public hearing was held in November. And just today, BWS went back to the Small Business Regulatory Review Board as required to review the post-public hearing findings and submitted a formal statement. And Ernie, maybe you want to summarize what happened there today.
Yeah, thank you. We went there this morning and presented back to the SBRRB. And Kathleen and I presented. Thank you, Kathleen. Kathy Mitchell helped prepare the impact statement that's required ahead of time to the Small Business Regulatory Review Board voted unanimously to support us. They understood. They stressed the importance of working with small businesses, and I think they understood the need. And they voted to support us. They did ask us next time. We sort of got to make sure that before the water board takes an action to adopt after a public hearing, between the holding a public hearing by the water board on the proposed rates and the board taking an action to adopt, we need to go back to the SBRRB before the board actually takes an action to adopt, so that the SBRRB can provide their input. But fortunately, today they gave their unanimous support. Thank you. Kathleen, you want to add anything?
Yeah, we made it really clear that we're available for additional outreach to small businesses, and several of the members indicated they want to take us up on that. So it was a positive meeting. Thank you.
As a result of the input that was received, BWS looked at a couple of things here. There was a suggestion to consider holding off of the 2024 increases altogether. And that was carefully evaluated. And so I wanted to just show you the results of that. So the idea there would be that instead of that 10% increase on February 1st and another 10% increase on July 1st of 2024, to hold those to 0%, with all the other increases being the same. The analysis of the results of that is that the first thing that would happen is that in this current fiscal year, the working capital, the amount of cash that the board has, would drop down to about $15.5 million. Roughly speaking, a day of working capital is a little over $500,000. So if we just kind of round it out, that would drop working capital down to about 30 days, which is, you know, well below the policy minimum. And then you can, that would also necessitate a number of cuts to planned capital expenditures to get that back up. Then you can see that in next fiscal year, BWS would actually go into the red by about $37 million. Since they can't operate in the red, that would necessitate, you know, $37 million in cuts just to get them to a break-even level of expenditures, and that would still leave 0 days working capital. And you can see that every year that situation gets worse and worse. Even though when the rate increases resume in July 1st of 2025, the damage has really been done, and it would take much more than those 9 and 8.5 and 8% increases to restore the financial condition to where it would have been. So that proved to be just a completely untenable scenario, and was not feasible to implement. What was done, though, and you had input into this, was limiting the increase for the essential needs tier. That's folks for the first 2,000 gallons of usage in each month. Every customer gets that low cost essential needs tier. And so limiting the increase in that rate tier to 2.5% per year. And in total, about 10% of BWS's residential customers use 2,000 gallons a month or less. So it's a big benefit. And again, that below cost rate carries through to all customers. And to make up for that, then the increases were skewed highest into the highest usage tier. So this is looking at the amount of increase in the usage tiers between current rates and what they would be effective on July 1st, 2028. So you can see for tier 1, that total increase in the first 2,000 gallons, but the cost per thousand would go up by less than 75 cents over that 5.5-year period. At the other end of the spectrum, for those customers whose usage extends up into tier 4, the cost per 1,000 gallons for all usage above 30,000 gallons would go from $9.25 per thousand up to $18.02 per thousand. So that's, again, it's the top 3% of BWS water users who have usage up in that top tier. So very targeted, very purposeful here to be able to help maintain affordability for low water users. Another really important element of this is to encourage water conservation and allow customers the ability to control their water bills by controlling how much water they use. And that really then ties quite strongly to the BWS's water conservation programs. There are already a number of conservation device rebates available, everything from rain barrels to controllers to rebates for low usage appliances, low flow toilets. You might have seen the 90-day special. Barry, I don't know if you want to cover the latest water conservation incentive that just got announced yesterday, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, and Kathleen can add as well. we are going to increase the rebate amount for toilets from I think $45 to $100. I think it was for 90 days to see if we can get a little more response. There's still a lot of these inefficient toilets that are out there and in existing homes, and we need to incentivize them to change it out, because that's one of the biggest water users. But I would also like to give a shout out to Dana and Hawaii Community Foundation for awarding that grant for the Kupuna Direct Install and Water Audit program, where we're going to be directing our Honeywell, our contractor, our water sensible contractor, to connect with a list of Kupuna units and see if their fixtures are not efficient, then we'll install it for them. And that funding is directly from HCF. Kathleen, can you add?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. The toilet rebate program is doing well. So we don't want to give the impression that we haven't. It's actually got started very strong and has continued. I think we just have, like 700 applications or something crazy like that in the last few months that we've been processing. So Honeywell's done a tremendous job, but we just felt, as Barry just said, we want to really push that. We really want to amp it up, because there is a lot of opportunity, we believe, still out there. And we think that this will help do it. So we're actually launching it at the building improvement show this weekend. So if you're in the neighborhood, stop by. And we're really excited about it. And then back on the Kupuna, we're getting started. We're going to be doing, we did, in part of our outreach, we got comments back from the public. We actually had a number of senior citizens who said, oh, wow, this is going to be very difficult and I'm very concerned. So what we did is we said, well, would you like us to come and do a water audit for you and maybe change out, put in some aerators, shower heads, things like that. So we offered to do them, and they're kind of like our test guinea pigs. So it was about 7 of these folks. And the good news is they're located all around the island. So that'll give us some good, I think, kind of feel for each island, what's going on for each part of the island. And so we're going to be making these appointments very soon. And then we're actually working with St. Francis, and they have a very strong, as many of you know, Kupuna program, in-house services, hospice, things like that. And so they're going to be providing us with names that Honeywell then take and work with their subcontractor and then make appointments and go into the folks' homes. We will be piloting this program on the west side in the Waianae Moku to start with, because that's where we've heard a lot of concerns from the elected officials and things. So we're going to start there, see how it goes, and then start expanding it through the rest of the island. But we're very, very excited that we can launch this program and then share it with our community and see how it goes. So thank you for your time.
Any questions? It's an exciting program. Really great developments here. Okay. I did want to show you a comparison of the proposed BWS water rates to, this is to over 50 other cities. We did this comparison during the last increase. And so you can see all these different cities coming down here, and San Francisco is down at the bottom. This is for the average amount of the BWS water bill. So a customer using 9,000 gallons of water per month. We took that 9,000 gallons of usage and calculated what that would cost in all these different cities. So it's highest in San Francisco at that 9,000 gallon per month bill would be over $150 per month. It's lowest up here in the top. You can see Albuquerque and Miami up at the top. And then the Board of Water Supply fits in about the middle of the pack here, with that bill being about $65 a month. And then you can see Maui County and Kauai County just right around the same spot, just a few a few pennies apart from each other. So that's looking at what the bill will be effective February 1st, 2024. We don't take this projection further out in time because we don't have any way to project what all these other cities are going to do with their water rates. But again, when we did this about 5 years ago, relative to all these different cities, BWS fell right in about the same place, middle of the pack, and it's consistent. So you can see, right, there's a consistent increase in water costs all across the board. So any questions on this comparison? Also, I think it's important to put this in perspective. BWS's average cost for water to a customer is about a penny per gallon. That compares with about $1.73 per gallon for bulk bottled water that you might purchase from Costco by the case, or if you happen to stop by that vending machine because you're thirsty, that ends up being about $15 per gallon. So you can see the incredibly affordable cost or low cost, I should say, compared to these other sources that people often utilize rather than carrying around a reusable bottle. So just to wrap up here, the rates process, as you know, the technical evaluation started back in 2022. The first stakeholder outreach was done in October of 2022, and that was actually at one of your meetings. We've been discussing rates out in the full public since July of 23. There was a formal public hearing that had at least 30 days notice. The advertisements were run. That was held on November 27th. And following that public hearing, the BWS board adopted Resolution 976/2023, which put these approved or adopted these rate increases. And you can see the vote there down in the box. There was one abstention and all others voted in favor. And I'll pause for any questions. I will say that I think on behalf of all the BWS staff and all the hard work that's gone into this over the past couple of years, I think we're all happy to be through this phase. Doing water rates is never a fun process. It's probably the least desirable thing that a water agency undertakes on a routine basis. And I'm happy that it went relatively smoothly and that we're past that till the next cycle. Ernie, any other comments?
Yeah, I just want to also acknowledge, Dave, the good work that you and your team did in supporting us through this process. This is the second time around, and this time, the impact of the pandemic and inflation and everything else that was happening, the rates had to be much larger increases than the previous time. But I really appreciate all the hard work and also acknowledge all the BWS folks on the team that got involved directly or indirectly in this process. And most importantly, thank you everybody on our stakeholder advisory group for the valuable input that you have provided in this process and continue to provide. Really appreciate it. It's just simply amazed. So mahalo nui, everybody.
Okay, if there's no other questions, Ernie, next topic's yours.
Oh, okay, thanks, Dave. Next slide, please. Next, please, just some quick updates on Red Hill. Actually, this is a little dated right now, but as of December, the Navy, under the Joint Task Force for Defueling, they removed 104.6 million gallons out of the Red Hill facility. So that's really reduced the threat of large future releases. But there still remains fuel in the Red Hill facility. This past Monday, they started to go after another 60,000 gallons that's in the pipeline system. And they're gonna have to drain that out. It'll take them till, I think, sometime in March to complete that. And at that time, next slide. Next time, they did issue a defueling supplement plan 3. And there's that 60,000 gallons, and then that they're going after that. But after they're done with the 60,000 gallons as phase 5B, there's still going to be about 4,000 gallons of fuel left in the pipelines, and about 28,000 gallons of sludge in the actual tanks. And right now, out of the 20 tanks there was fuel in 14 of those tanks. So they actually now have to physically go into each of those 14 tanks and remove and clean the tanks out and remove that 28,000 gallons of sludge. It's going to take about 2 months to clean each tank. So that work will go on. This work probably for about a little over 3 years. I think what their latest estimates are. Next, please. Then I mentioned about the defueling joint task force led by Vice Admiral Wade. They will stand down, or they'll be disbanded probably around April or May of this year. And then a new task force, and now so the joint task force defueling joint task force, that was made up of not only Navy, but also other arms of the service, including the Army was involved, and the National Guard was involved. But in this transition to a new task force, and I think it's called Navy Closure Task Force Red Hill, it's going to now go back to the Navy, to actually remove the remaining part of the fuel, clean up the facility, and then do the permanent closure. So what we're looking at is probably around middle of 2027 when they get all the fuel and sludge out of there, and about I think end of 2028 before they finally close the facility. So we still got about 4+ years to go with the Red Hill, but the work is not done because at the same time, they have to now work on remediation of the INA and cleanup of the water that's been contaminated and impacted by Red Hill. Next, please. So these are the different documents, the closure task force, Navy Closure Task Force Red Hill. It's going to be led by the commander of Navy Region Hawaii. And that currently is Rear Admiral Stephen Barnett. And I think he's going to be here until closure is completed. So at least probably another 3 to 4 years. So those are some of the dates. Next, please. And that's the command structure. It's impossible to read this, but this task force would report to the Chief of Naval Operations, the head of the Navy, Secretary of the Navy, and the Secretary of Defense. Next, please. And these are just some of the upcoming events. We have a meeting. I think it's tomorrow with the 3 admirals: Vice Admiral John Wade, Rear Admiral Stephen Barnett, and Rear Admiral Jeff Killian tomorrow at Pearl Harbor. We meet with them every 2 months or so to stay in communication and get updates with them. I think that kind of does it for the updates. Are there any questions from anybody? I see Bob's got his hand up. Go ahead, Bob.
So emptying the tanks will take a couple of years. But the burning question that a lot of people like to kick around is, will they remove the tanks when it's all done? Will they fill it with water? Will it be a sound studio for echo chambers? No. where's the conversation at this point in time about its future empty use?
That's still out for discussion. I think Nakapuna, the consultant for the Navy, finished their work. It's still between the Navy and the Department of Health. The beneficial reuse of the Red Hill facility didn't come from the Navy. It actually came from our State Department of Health asking them about potential beneficial reuse of the facility. And my concern has always been, let's not have this facility remain in a condition that would allow the Navy to reactivate it, to bring it out of mothballs and start to store fuel over our drinking water aquifer again. Let that never happen ever again forever. And then the beneficial reuse, don't create another problem by bringing other substances there that could be damaging to the environment, to our water resources. So that's still unclear. We know that the Navy has committed to remove the 3 pipelines that run from the tanks to Pearl Harbor, and that's about 3 miles each. So a total of over 9 miles of pipes that connect the tanks to Pearl Harbor. The tanks itself, I think what they're still looking at is just, at this point, is still just to clean it out and leave it. But I suggested maybe filling it up with some inert material or removing the lower half of the steel plate liner. But it's still up for discussion. We'll still need to get access. The Navy is still going to be on the hook to clean up the environment, the contamination that has emanated from this facility. And the latest is that they did a baseline test of about 21 different monitor wells for PFAS. I've been asking for nearly over a year now that they be required to test every month for PFAS at all monitor well locations in and around the Red Hill facility. And what they came back with this baseline report was actually they found PFAS at multiple locations, particularly around Red Hill Shaft, different levels of PFAS. And I think it's raised concerns by the EPA about the situation. So what we heard in a meeting that the EPA is telling the Navy that of all the PFAS contamination sites in Pearl Harbor, Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, and there's numerous locations, that the Red Hill situation is the top priority for the Navy to address. So we'll see what happens. So the story is far from over. Now it's going to be probably decades of investigation and cleanup.
Other questions for Ernie? Doesn't have to be about Red Hill. You got him here. He's cornered. He'll answer anything.
I'm here as long as you want me to be here. So. What else I wanted to share. Oh, okay. So I know that there was a news release put out by the State Department of Health that included a quote from the governor about Board of Water Supply. These are rate increases. Didn't look like the governor was too happy with it. And the Department of Health said suddenly there was a $75 million for bipartisan infrastructure law funding that was available was for the Board of Water Supply, that we should we should get it, and we should look at adjusting our rate increases. We dug down a little deeper because this bipartisan infrastructure law funding that the Department of Health was referring to, it looks like it was number one, one part of it was actually to address emerging contaminants for small water systems and disadvantaged communities. And the other part of it was kind of under the drinking water SRF, or State Revolving Fund program, also for emerging contaminants. And also, this 75 million, the state actually doesn't have $75 million from federal money in hand. They only have funding for the first 2 years, and there's about 3 years of funding allocations that the state of Hawaii has not received yet. So it's still with the federal government, with the EPA. So in total, it looks like what's in hand that the Department of Health has available is about $32 million out of that 75 million. And also, when we dug down deeper and we've been meeting with the Department of Health and US EPA on this to get more clarity on the constraints or requirements for use of these funds, that it is not only for Board of Water Supply. It is for any other community or other county water system or small private water systems around the state of Hawaii. So it isn't only meant for Board of Water Supply. But to be able to use it, we have to have it be able to use it for addressing emerging contaminants that are not yet regulated by the EPA. And we could use it to address PFAS and lead and copper issues. But it really is money that is not widely available and clearly not to replace aging pipelines in our water system, but to address emerging contaminants that are being found in drinking in the water. Any questions? So I just wanted to have the clarification. So we continue to work with Department of Health and EPA. We just had a meeting yesterday to look at how we can leverage as much of this money as we possibly can if we have projects that fit the timeline for use of this money and also the other requirements to address emerging contaminants.
All right. Any other questions for Ernie? All right. Ernie, anything else?
No, I really went on a little long there, but again, I really appreciate everybody hanging with us through this. Coming up in the future, there's going to be some big initiatives, one of which is an update of our water master plan, and Barry's going to be Barry and the Water Resources Division is going to be the lead, and of course involve all of you in that process.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm sure that's going to be talked about at future meetings. Upcoming meeting dates, Thursday, April 18th, Thursday, July 18th, and then Thursday, October 17th, all at the same time as we've been holding to 4 to 6 p.m. And look forward to seeing you all in April, and hope you have a great rest of the afternoon and evening.